Welcome to AI Book Chat, where two AI podcasters dive into books that I've read. These lively discussions are powered by Google's experimental audio overview feature in NotebookLM. We use publicly available author interviews alongside my personal insights to bring a fresh take on each book. Expect engaging summaries, unique takes, and a few fun surprises along the way. Since our voices are AI-generated, there might be a few quirks, audio glitches, or inaccuracies, but that's part of the experiment. Join us for a laid-back chat as we explore ideas, stories, and more through the lens of AI.
All right, so you know how much we love diving into the world of intelligence, both human and artificial. Well, get ready, because today we're tackling Jeff Hawkins' thousand brains theory. And trust me, this one's a mind-bender.
It really is fascinating stuff. It challenges a lot of the traditional thinking about how the brain works, especially the neocortex, the part that handles all our fancy thinking.
Right, like instead of seeing it as one big central processing unit, Hawkins is saying, hold on, what if it's more like a massive team effort?
Exactly. He calls it a thousand brains theory for a reason. He believes the neocortex is made up of thousands of these independent units, these mini brains, all working in parallel.
So it's not just one mega brain calling all the shots. It's more like a brain democracy.
I like that. Brain democracy. And each of these mini brains, which Hawkins calls columns, is busy building its own model of the world based on what it's sensing and the movements it makes.
Okay, so let's try to make this concrete. Imagine you're reaching for your coffee cup. Maybe your eyes are half closed. Each column on your fingertip is feeling the curve of the cup, the warmth, the texture. They're all building their own little understanding of what that coffee cup experience is.
And here's where it gets really interesting. One column might be thinking, is this a donut? Another might be saying, could be a bracelet, who knows? But together, they pool their knowledge, compare their individual models, and they basically vote on what they think it is.
Wait a minute, the brain has elections. Tell me more about this whole voting system.
It's like democracy, but on a neural level, right? This voting system is what makes the brain so incredibly good at handling uncertainty and noisy information. Even if a few columns are off base, the collective decision is usually spot on.
So that's why I don't usually try to drink from the handle of my mug.
Ah.
But this brings up a big question, especially for someone interested in AI like yourself. How does this thousand brains idea change how we should be thinking about building smarter machines?
Well, it highlights just how different the brain is from how we currently design AI. If we want machines that can learn and adapt like humans, we need to move away from this idea of one central processor and towards these more distributed modular systems. It's about embracing uncertainty, not trying to eliminate it.
So we need AI that can be a little unsure of itself, that can argue with itself and come to a consensus.
Exactly, and that's something that current AI systems really struggle with. They might get thrown off by a weird angle or strange lighting, whereas the brain, with all its distributed intelligence in this voting system, is much more adaptable and resilient.
So it's not just a matter of making AI more powerful. It's about fundamentally changing the way it processes information.
Absolutely. And one of the keys to making that happen might lie in understanding how these thousands of mini-brains in the neocortex actually organize all the information they're taking in.
Because if each of these mini-brains is building its own model of the world, how does it all get put back together? How do I avoid becoming 1,000 different versions of myself, each with its own reality?
That's where reference frames come in. And this is where Hawkins' theory gets even more mind-blowing. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to really grasp European history, right? You could try to memorize all the dates and names on a timeline.
Sure. Kings, battles, treaties, it all starts to blur together.
Exactly. It's just a jumble of facts, not very helpful for understanding the bigger picture. But now imagine you're exploring that same history on a map.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Suddenly it all clicks into place.
Yeah.
You see how geography shaped alliances, how borders shifted over time.
Precisely. That map becomes your reference frame, a way to organize all those individual facts and see how they relate to each other. And Hawkins says our brains use these reference frames for all kinds of knowledge, not just spatial stuff.
So it's not just about knowing where Paris is on a map. It's about understanding how its location influenced its history, its culture, its role in the world.
Exactly. It's about building these mental models that help us make sense of complex information. And these models are built on relationships. They're not just static lists of facts.
So my brain is like a giant web of interconnected maps. I like it. But let's bring this back down to earth for a second. How about a real-world example?
Sure, let's take something simple, like a stapler.
A stapler. Okay, now I'm really curious. What do staplers have to do with all of this?
Well, think about what it takes to truly understand a stapler. It's not just about recognizing it as a stapler, right? It's about understanding the relationship between its parts, how they move together, the purpose it serves.
Right, like how that little metal piece interacts with the spring to bind the pages together.
Exactly. Our brains automatically create these reference frames to understand the stapler as a whole, as a system, not just a bunch of random parts.
So our understanding is built on these dynamic, interconnected models, not just static definitions. It's kind of like how a good encyclopedia entry doesn't just tell you what something is, but also how it works, its history, its significance.
I like that analogy. And this is where we see a big difference between how our brains work and how a lot of current AI operates.
Because most AI isn't building these complex reference frames in the same way.
Exactly. A lot of AI is very good at pattern recognition, at identifying a stapler as a stapler, but it struggles with understanding those deeper relationships, that context.
So it might be able to pick a stapler out of a lineup, but it wouldn't necessarily know how to use it or understand its role in an office environment.
Precisely. And that's one of the big hurdles in AI right now, figuring out how to move beyond just pattern recognition to this deeper level of understanding that involves reference frames.
So if we want to build truly intelligent machines, we need to teach them how to build these internal maps, these dynamic models of the world. But how do we do that? I mean, should we be creating robots that crawl around and interact with the world like babies do, slowly building up their understanding through trial and error?
It's definitely an approach that some researchers are exploring, and it makes sense. A lot of our early learning is very physical, very sensory-driven. But Hawkins believes these principles of movement and sensory experience can be applied to more abstract domains as well.
Wait, so you're saying we can use the same principles that help us understand physical objects to understand things like philosophy or advanced math? How do you physically move through a calculus equation?
Well, it's not about literal movement, of course. But it's about finding ways to actively engage with the information, to mentally move through it.
So instead of just passively reading a textbook, I should be actively questioning, making connections, trying to build my own mental maps of the concepts.
Right. It's about making those abstract concepts more tangible, more connected to what you already know. Think about the memory palace technique, where you visualize placing facts in different rooms of a familiar building.
Oh yeah, I've actually tried that using my childhood home to memorize a presentation. Works surprisingly well.
So you're saying our brains are constantly building these massive memory palaces for everything we learn? In a way, yes. Every new experience, every new piece of information adds to that incredible structure. That's what makes the brain such an amazing learning machine. But you bring up an interesting point. What about forgetting? If our understanding is like this constantly evolving map, don't those pathways fade if we don't use them? Like, how often do I need to revisit my French Revolution mental map to keep it from disappearing?
Yeah, it's like that saying, use it or lose it. Does that apply to our mental models too?
Well, forgetting is a natural part of how our brains work. But the strength of those connections, how easily we forget something, depends on how deeply we've engaged with it. The more actively we build those connections, the more we use them, the more ingrained they become.
So it's not just about building the map, it's about exploring it, using it to navigate new terrain.
Exactly. The more you explore those mental pathways, the more you challenge your assumptions, the richer and more resilient your understanding becomes. And that brings us back to the challenge of AI. We're still a long way from creating machines that can truly learn and adapt like humans do.
Because most AI systems aren't designed to build these dynamic, interconnected models of the world.
Precisely. Many AI models are designed to be very specialized, very good at one particular task, but they lack that flexibility, that ability to transfer knowledge from one domain to another, which is something humans do naturally.
It's like the difference between having a detailed map of one city versus having a compass and the skills to navigate any terrain.
I like that analogy. And that's the exciting frontier of AI research, figuring out how to imbue machines with those same navigational skills, that same thirst for exploration and understanding.
Well, Jeff Hawkins has given us a lot to think about today, both about the incredible potential of our own brains and the challenges of building truly intelligent machines. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap things up?
I think the biggest takeaway from Hawkins's work is that learning isn't passive. It's not about just absorbing information. It's about actively engaging with it, building those mental models, and using them to navigate the world around us.
So to everyone listening, keep those brains buzzing, explore those new connections, challenge your assumptions, and never stop learning. Until next time.